The base is dropped on a Monday morning here in Atlanta, Georgia. The first chilly morning of the second half of 2019. It got a little cold yesterday. It was sweater weather and raincoat weather in the metro Atlanta area. Maybe fall's actually a thing. That's not a rumor anymore. Maybe it's actually going to happen now that it's October 14th. We'll find out. We'll see if this sticks. I think it's actually supposed to warm up a little bit today, so who knows. We've got lots of things to talk about on a Monday, less than a week away from the resumption of the MLS season and the start of the MLS playoffs. We still have international matches this week to discuss over the next couple of days, and we'll get into all of that. United States and Canada tomorrow, Concacaf Nations League. I feel like I want to defend the Concacaf Nations League. Everybody wants to tear this competition down. I think maybe there will be some different feelings about it after tomorrow night's match, because I think that will be the competitive game that some have been looking for. But overall, I think the competition can be a very good thing. But all of that is pushed to the side just a little bit because we've got news coming out of BBC Sport breaking this, which is not who I expected to run with this. But Joe Curry of BBC Sport this morning reports that Vlatko Andonovski is set to become the new U.S. women's national team head coach. 43 years old, currently head coach at Reign FC in Tacoma, Seattle. Moved over to the Tacoma area to play this season. Had been mentioned all along when, and I think this is what makes this whole situation interesting, John, is Kate Markgraf was working for ESPN. Before she was named general manager, she mentioned that the likely U.S. women's national team coaching candidates were Vlatko Andonovski, Paul Riley, Laura Harvey, and Mark Krikorian, who's the head coach at Florida State. Riley came out very quickly and said that he wasn't interested. Krikorian did the same. Laura Harvey, over the weekend, said that she won't be the next U.S. women's national team coach and plans on returning to Utah. And this was from an article at Deseret News by Ryan McDonald, who covers the Utah Royals, and the quote is, "Well, I won't be the women's national team coach. I can say that." So that kind of narrows it down from great women's soccer reporter Jeff Kassouf, because last week the Equalizer, where Jeff Kassouf writes, said that it was between Harvey and Andonovski. So when you start doing the process of elimination, you're down to Andonovski. And initially, when you see, okay, out of the four candidates that the now general manager said would be the candidates before she was the general manager, two removed themselves from the running, and then it was down to two, and one comes out and says they're not going to be it. Well, one, you can assume that decision has been made, but two, you're kind of like, well, is this the best choice? Is this the best option? And you start to dig into Vlatko Andonovski's background. Played professionally in Eastern Europe, was born in the former Yugoslavia, came to the United States to play indoors professionally with the Kansas City Comets. He ultimately became their head coach. During that time, he also took on coaching FC Kansas City of the NWSL, was involved in the youth game in Kansas City. When FC Kansas City folded and then was reborn as the Utah Royals, Laura Harvey had been kind of in a weird spot. She was going to join Jill Ellis's coaching staff. That fell through. So she had left Reign FC. She went to Utah when that job opened up and became a job. And then Andonovski, who had been out of a job because Kansas City went away, went to Reign FC. So it was kind of like a weird moving set of musical chairs. He's done very well at Reign FC. And he's very well liked by players. And this is what has won me over. When you get Allie Long, who's played for him, to say he's probably one of the most intelligent soccer brains that I've ever come across, that's one thing. When Emily Sonnet, who hasn't played for him, says this, I look up to Becky Sauerbrunn. I think she's so good. She had the same college coach, and I now get to play with her and see her development. She had Vlatko in Kansas City. He played center back, and what I've seen him do with her and some of the other players that he's had, like internationals, I think has been incredible, and I've only heard great things about him. So that's why I always say, before I'm done, I hope I get coached by Vlatko. It's one thing for Allie Long to say things like, most intelligent soccer brain, I think U.S. Soccer deserves a coach like Vlatko in the system. I hope she looks at Vlatko seriously because I think the whole team wants Vlatko. That's one. But when you've got players who haven't played for him but have seen the impact he's had on their teammates and say, I hope I get coached by him. All of that combined makes you feel pretty good if Vlatko Andonovski is announced as the U.S. women's national team manager.
Yeah, you know the CV, and you went through it, and he's getting ready for a semifinal in the NWSL when the semifinals come to the fore, and he's going up against the North Carolina Courage. But when you see all of these pieces in sound bites and quotes come together where you have players who've played for him sit there and they have the highest praise, and then that next level stuff like you brought in with Emily Sonnet where you have players who are wanting to play with this guy as their coach at some point, and to have that kind of impact, secondhand impact, and then the anticipation and the desire to want to play for someone like that, for stars like an Emily Sonnet. Now it appears, if things continue in the train that we've seen this morning from Joe Curry, that you're going to get that chance. And, as someone who is known for his tactics, and you want this kind of a challenge, I think, once in your life, when you sit there and you're like, all right, I see that brass ring and I want that kind of a challenge. And to see a guy like Vlatko Andonovski perhaps take this next step and be the women's national team head coach. With all of this word of mouth that I've seen, I'm looking forward to seeing how it now translates should he become the new head coach.
See, but I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. The CV wasn't what won me over. Honestly, that's where I was a little concerned. No, but you mentioned the CV, and he's got 2 championships with Kansas City, but we're talking 2014, 2015, a very different NWSL. I feel like it's at a higher level now. The last 2 seasons of Kansas City wasn't good. Now, they had ownership issues, but not good at all. 2 seasons with Reign FC, 3rd and 4th. Lost in the semifinals last year. We'll see if they can find an upset against the North Carolina Courage. When you compare the CVs, obviously Paul Riley's going to grab your attention the most. Not interested. Mark Krikorian, what he's done at Florida State, has to grab your attention. Wasn't interested. That concerned me initially. I'm like, okay, the most successful people are not interested in this. That's not a good situation. But those quotes are what win you over. That's the biggest difference, is when the players mention how much either they've learned from him or how much they've seen their teammates benefit from playing with him. And I'll be really curious to hear what Mark Graff says about the decision, because just reading between the lines, when Laura Harvey starts the topic, when asked about it, well, I won't be the women's national team coach, I can say that. I'm going to assume that she wanted to be. I'm going to assume that she didn't pull herself out of that decision, that Andonovski was selected ahead of her. And when you look at the CVs and you compare, Harvey has more time in the women's game, and 2 NWSL Coach of the Year awards, 2 Shield winners with Reign FC. It's either comparable to Andonovski or maybe a better CV. Definitely more on the experience side. And Laura Harvey had a lot of success with Arsenal in a different time in the women's game in England, but still 91 wins out of 109 matches is pretty freaking good. So you look at the CVs and you're like, well, okay, is this the right decision? But it sounds like, just judging from things that Ali Long and Emily Sonnet told Once a Metro when the national team played at Red Bull Arena, the players were solidly behind Andonovski. Not to mean that they weren't behind the idea of Laura Harvey, but it sounds like Andonovski really does a good job connecting with his players.
And in the CV sense, I was also adding the knowledge of the youth game because you're going to need that knowledge for players who are going to be up and coming through the system. But yes, to your point.
Depending on what the actual roles are. I mean, that's the thing that we don't really know. In the past, I would have said absolutely yes. But now, is that Markgraf's purview? Is that them working together? Is there some technical director type of thing? Is there somebody else who's going to be on the staff? Who knows? I think it helps more than anything, and Harvey has it too, so I don't know if it's really one instead of the other, just in terms of what that development pathway can be. It's helpful to know it even if it's not necessarily your area of oversight.
But, yeah, when you have players who are stepping up publicly and talking about Vlatko Andonovski, and when you have players who've been with him, players who they think that deserve them, the word of mouth from Ali Long, you add that to Emily Sonnet sitting there saying that she wants to play by the time she's done for someone like Vlatko. I think that word of mouth also has a major impact when it comes to trying to figure out column, when you split the legal pad down the center and you're sitting there and going yay and nay, trying to figure out a decision. If Kate Markgraf was doing something like this, and then when you have players saying that they think X, they want to play for Coach Y, those kinds of things end up in the yes column. And interesting to see what that legal pad piece of paper was like to determine possibly that Andonovski is going to be the new head coach.
In addition to Ali Long, Megan Rapinoe plays for Reign FC. Haven't seen any direct quotes from Megan Rapinoe about Andonovski, but you would assume that she has a pretty big voice in all of this, representing the player side of things. So, yeah. And in other former players who played with Andonovski at Kansas City. Looks like that's going to be the decision. And it's good timing because you will have the Olympics coming up next year. This will give Andonovski time to prepare because this is a tough gig. I mean, when you look at what Andonovski has to do now, he's replacing the most successful manager in women's soccer history, flat out. Back-to-back World Cups. Jill Ellis has taken this program to another level, and maybe, and we talked about it going into this cycle, and Ellis was able to get another cycle out of some players that I wasn't sure she'd be able to. It feels like the next cycle, and maybe the Olympics is either the culmination of the current one or the start of the next one, and that's going to be a tough decision for Andonovski to make. It feels like the next World Cup will look very different from a roster perspective than the current one, even more than this one looked from 2015.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree completely, and I just wonder over the next X number of competitions how much of the veterans are going to be there, and then how much of that next wave is going to be coming through. So it's an interesting time as you're looking at the women's national team, because it is a time of transition in more than one way. And with this possible first step happening, I want to see how he gets a handle on things and how they look at the player pool and what veterans are going to be hanging around and for how much longer and who's going to be challenging them and what that next wave is going to look like.
Yeah, I mean, the question of what's next, it's a big one because, I mean, you're not going to expect to see Carly Lloyd, Megan Rapinoe, Ashlyn Harris. There's a number of players that I don't think will be there in 2023. They could be for the Olympics. That's what makes the cycles a little awkward on the women's side, because you have the Olympics the year after the World Cup. Generally, your cycles are defined by the World Cup. The Olympics can throw a wrench into that. Do you go ahead and start the next World Cup cycle, or do you try to get what you can out of what you have? Couple more things from an article over at ESPN.com. Graham Hayes, who writes for ESPNW.com, mentioned that Megan Rapinoe said over the weekend that she and other veteran players have been consulted by Kate Markgraf about the search. The reporting from ESPN was the same as Jeff Kassouf. It was pretty much down to Andonovski and Lauren Harvey. That's where all the talk had centered on, so it seemed to be down to one or both. Rapinoe did say this, at least for the two NWSL coaches that I think are being highly considered, I'm one of the players that has played for both. I think she wanted to get feedback on all of that, talking about Markgraf. And then just in general, what we all feel like are necessary characteristics and traits, what we like about coaches and don't. She's been really open. Now, this is what Becky Sauerbrunn, who also played for both, played 5 seasons for Kansas City under Andonovski, 2 for Harvey in Utah. Sauerbrunn said, she's very tactical, high level, talking about Harvey. I think she has a very good philosophy of how to play the game and then how to get people in the right positions. If you give her a board and some X's and O's, she can go to town on anything. She can break anyone down. So I feel really prepared going into all the games that I have with her. I know how we want to play. I know how the other team is probably going to play and how we counteract that. Both seemed to say, and Rapinoe echoed this, said that Harvey is a player's coach. So I don't think it was an easy decision, it sounds like, for Kate Markgraf, because it sounds like you have players who did know both pretty well. Rapinoe said this about Andonovski. He's a little bit more direct and harsher than Laura, but I think players still really like to play for him. I think he has this unique ability to really get the best out of every player and meet them where they're at. So he sort of treats every player the same, but understands that every player isn't the same. And then his tactical flexibility and knowledge is tremendous. Even being in the NWSL, I don't think he's really able to put on his full arsenal of what he knows. So, sounds like both were very strong candidates. Sounds like both had a lot of support from the players, and Kate Markgraf had a difficult decision to make. And without hearing what Laura Harvey, and how she said it, I'm assuming that she wanted the job and is probably disappointed she didn't get it. And we'll see if it's the right decision from Kate Markgraf.
Yeah, and this is her first big one. And you sit there and it's like, all right, this is where you've done your research, and this looks like the first decision that you're going to make. And fairly or unfairly, I know that a lot of folks are going to sit there and hang their hat on Kate Markgraf with this first decision. And
they have
look
to.
At it.
I mean, this is the biggest decision you're going to make.
Yeah. So, all right. So you've now apparently made your decision. So we'll see how it lays out from here. And once again, this is the beginning of your GM-ness. And so we'll see where it goes, allegedly.
The questions that ESPN leaves us with about what's next for the U.S. women's national team, just to keep in mind, these are some of the decisions that Vlatko Andonovski, if he is the hire, is going to have to decide upon. Where does Crystal Dunn play? Is she a left back? Is she a winger? Is she a forward? Where does she play? Because she's done all of it for club and country. Who is Alex Morgan's understudy as the number 9 for the next generation? Don't know. Not really sure where that's going to go. How do Tierna Davidson and Mallory Pugh take the next step and lock down starting roles? It's a good one. And this is a player that I don't know yet, but she's going into her senior season, I believe senior season at Stanford. Looks like another player of the year type of season. Born in Brazil, Catarina Macario. Are you going to be able to get her into the mix? It's another top player that you need to start getting the top talent. And look, we've talked about it on the men's side. The dual national situation, it's going to be strong on the women's side as well. You've already seen players, make decisions about representing Mexico and could have represented the United States. Sofia Huerta is one who opted for the United States. Generally, that's from, like with U.S. Mexico, there's a big difference between the two programs, a big difference in level. Brazil's a little bit different conversation, not quite as simple. Another question from ESPN is, will depth eventually demand a 4-person midfield? And what's next for Carly Lloyd over the next year? She's had a great year. A year that I didn't know if she could have this kind of year. Sounds like she wants to be there in 2020 in the Olympics. Is she going to be there in the Olympics? These are all difficult decisions, and all that will start with Andonovski being announced, if he's the decision, very soon. The sooner the better. And if you're starting to get reporting like Joe Curry's from BBC Sport this morning, I would assume that decision will be announced very soon to go ahead and start this process and start to look ahead. That's the news this morning. That one caught us by surprise a little bit. Didn't know if a decision would happen so quickly once it seemed like it narrowed down to 2. Andonovski still has work to do with Reign FC, as John mentioned, talking about the NWSL semifinals coming up. So I'm assuming he wouldn't completely jump in until after Reign FC is eliminated. Maybe the announcement is held till then, too. I could completely understand that. So we'll see what happens. But there's your U.S. women's national team update. Whoever takes the job, it's going to be a difficult job because of who you're following in Jill Ellis and the success she's had. Sometimes it's hard to follow a legend. You know, we always have this conversation. And can Vlatko Andonovski find the success that Jill Ellis did? And if he doesn't, how's he going to be judged? The women's game's consistently improving. He might do a great job, and they might not win the next World Cup.
And how is Mark Graf judged in turn?
Yeah, and that plays into it as well. I think the way these roles have been created, the general managers are kind of separate from all of it. So if they're competitive, I don't think Mark Graf is going to be judged harshly, but if they really struggle over the next cycle, then that's a different conversation. If they're competitive and get beat by an up-and-coming team like a Netherlands, like a Spain, like a France, like a Brazil with Pia Sundhage, if they get beat by someone because they get beat, that's a very different conversation than if they struggle. They don't get out of a group stage at the World Cup or something like that. We'll see what happens. It's going to be very interesting to follow along with the U.S. women's national team. If you didn't see over the weekend, the final regular season attendances were announced in the NWSL, and that post-World Cup bump continued, and it was very good. You saw lots of big numbers around the league. Now the trick is sustain that in an off-season, sustain that going into another season, and there's also reports that they are on the search for a commissioner. There's going to be changes at the NWSL side as well, which will affect the national team because the relationship with U.S. Soccer, kind of overseeing management of the NWSL, that is going to be up at the end of the season. It sounds like the NWSL is going to go more on their own, which is going to require more investment from ownership to fund a league office and things like that. So with the discussion about a new commissioner, you could see a new dawning of the NWSL. The hope is that it doesn't take that long for that to happen because the longer you wait, the less time you have in the offseason to prepare for 2020, and the more complicated it gets. All kinds of things on the women's game. We'll keep covering that for you as we go. But we're going to take a quick break now, come back, get you updated on everything in the MLS world, as we're now in a playoff week as teams start to prepare for their first round of playoff matches next weekend. Hang out with us. We'll be right back.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here. October 14th. It's an overreaction Monday. Man, there were some overreactions. Maybe. Hopefully it's an overreaction. We'll find out soon enough. Miles Robinson has left the U.S. men's national team camp after suffering a hamstring injury in a post-match training session on Friday night after the U.S. beat Cuba 7-0. I don't know what the plan was. I mean, I've seen questions about that. I have no idea. I can't say it's something that I've seen often with a post-match training session, and it might not have been a training session. That's what it was termed as. It looked more than fitness work. That's generally what you'll see after a match in these situations, where the unused substitutes will get a run in, get a jog in, do some sprints, stuff like that. This looked a little bit more than that from the video shot from across the stadium, but I don't know. I don't know what the format was. There's no way you can throw any shade at the coaching staff without knowing more. So I would definitely caution everyone to do that. I would also say, let's wait and see, first off, because nobody's going to know anything until he is back with Atlanta United and is checked out by Atlanta United staff and things are able to be judged. It would be a huge loss, obviously. Miles Robinson has been a best 11 defender of the year. It'd be a huge loss for any team. I think Atlanta United has depth to deal. I wonder how this would affect the tactics on display on Saturday afternoon against the New England Revolution. I wonder if this would see a return to a four-man backline and how that could look if so. And if not, then how do you make up for Robinson's ability to clean things up in this defense if he is unavailable? And that's still a big if.
So, right now, obviously, more questions than answers. And I saw the telephoto upon telephoto video that was posted from the other end of the stadium. And there really isn't a whole lot that you can make from it other than it looked more than players jogging that we're used to seeing post-match.
There was more structure to it, at least, I think is fair to say. It wasn't just the jog midway to end line and back. It wasn't just that with some sprints mixed in. Yeah, like drills or something, competition of some degree. But I don't know about competition. I'm not gonna say that. I don't know if there was any competition or anything revolving in it. So that's the thing, you don't know. Yeah. So, but once again, when you're going into a situation and you don't know context and you don't know what was going on, yes, we know that Miles has the hamstring injury, but you don't know how it was sustained and in what context of it. So, obviously, going into a playoff week, information is going to be at a premium at best. So just take it, and this is going to be very, very sports cliche-ish for an overreaction Monday, which is appropriate. But just take it day at a time.
information that comes out, and go from there. So it's the beginning of a very long week toward a playoff game, and so we don't know depth, don't know context, and so all we know is that he left camp.
Teams training this morning. No players or Frank de Boer are listed as available for media. That doesn't mean there wouldn't be any conversations with players. Frank de Boer is scheduled to speak to the media on Thursday. I'm honestly not expecting an update until then. You never know.
Yeah.
But I think this is, in some ways, if Robinson is okay, and I mean it wasn't described as anything catastrophic, but timing is everything. This gives Frank de Boer a little bit of a weapon to keep New England on their heels now, because now if you're the New England Revolution, you don't know about Robinson playing, but more importantly, you don't know, is it 3 center backs? Is it 4 in the back? Is it a 4-3-3? Does that mean you change things up in the attacking side of it? Who could the personnel be? What could you do to deal with this? It creates a lot of unknown for New England that can throw them off. And we talked about it after the first match. You know, why would Atlanta really make any dramatic changes after having a successful first match, even though you did concede some chances in the first half of that? Why would you make dramatic changes? You don't really know exactly what New England might change. Are they going to play 5-3-2? Maybe if they're thinking at this point that Robinson might not be available, they might not sit back and bunker. They might say, well, we believe in our attack. That's what's carried us. We're going to roll with that, and we're going to stay in the 4-3-3, or we're even going to play an attacking 4-4-2 or something different. This creates a lot of uncertainty on the New England side, which not exactly the way you want to do it, but it does give you a little something to throw New England off with. So I don't think you want to dispel that anytime soon.
No, you want to have your opponent prepare for as many different eventualities as humanly possible,
and this creates them because you didn't have them before.
Yes. Nope. And so now you're sitting there and you're like, okay, you have to deal with all of these if-thens, and you have to have a thicker book than you would originally coming into this match. So, it serves Atlanta well by not saying anything. And if you're New England, you have to prepare for everything coming down the line, whether there is a Miles, whether there's a temporary Miles, whether he's there for 60 or 30 or coming into the 18. All these different eventualities you now have to look at.
You now have to prepare for 3 different things that we'll go with 2 to keep it simple. I don't think it gets really weird. I think it's down to the 3-5-2 or the 4-3-3. And in the 3-5-2, you've got the variant of Pity Martinez and Ezequiel Barco both playing, which turns it more into a 3-4-3, which is a different type of preparation for New England. The 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1 or 4-1-4-1 or whatever you want to call it, 4-3-2-1, you could play it that way too. You've got some big differences if you're New England in how you deal with that because of how Frank de Boer could line it up. You could play 2 holding midfielders with Ezequiel Barco or Pity Martinez as a true number 10 in front with wingers. Merrim and Gressel could be up high, for example. There's lots of different things you can do here. So if you're New England, one, you would be happy to not see Miles Robinson because he's been one of the best defenders in the league, flat out. But 2, this makes it far harder to prepare for what Frank de Boer could line up against you. It's one of those little things that could be the blessing in disguise to throw New England off. Now, you hope that ultimately Miles Robinson is available, or if he's not, and you do have to play something different, and it works, Miles Robinson would be available for the next match. You don't want to create this kind of uncertainty on a regular basis, but it might be a nice little bonus in this situation where you're playing a team for the second time in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and this is where poker comes into play. It's the postseason, and you're sitting there, and it's like, all right, here's the hand. What's the other guy got? And then you have to play against that without knowing what the dealer gave him. So, so if you're New England, you've got a lot of stuff to prepare for. And to your, what you said earlier, we're not going to hear from Frank until Thursday, and I would pretty much bank on Frank DeBoer sitting there and saying the most positive things humanly possible, regardless of what may actually be going on.
I don't know. That I'm not so sure on, to be honest. I don't know if he tells you or not what the situation is. He might. He could at that point, because your preparation is going to be done. And if you're Bruce Arena right now, you're getting ready for training, or you've started training, and you did this last night, or you did this on Saturday after the news came out, you start running through the different possibilities. So then you have to create your training plan accordingly. You're going to train all week based off a plan. If something is said Thursday after your training session on Thursday, you've got one day to do a walkthrough. You're not going to be able to retrain what you've worked on. So you've got to make a decision right now in how you do your training, really based on how you think you're going to play. And you might not know how you're going to play because you don't know how the opponent's going to play. So it creates all this confusion. And that's a good thing in the big picture side of it for Atlanta United. But hopefully it's confusion that ultimately sees Miles Robinson play, because you want your best center back playing in a knockout game. If he doesn't, you do have options, and you do have the option to go back to a four-man back line. Now, of course, then questions start about how this is going to look and how it could work out. One question that our friend Jarrett Smith chimed in with on our group message is George Bello. I don't think that happens. George Bello plays in a World Cup match in Brazil on October 27th. I don't think he leaves USU-17 camp or program to play on October 19th. I don't see it. I don't think it's the best thing for him. Not when you have Mikey Ambrose. Because Mikey Ambrose would be the one who I think could play at left back in that situation if you need to. Mikey Ambrose has been playing consistently for Atlanta United too. It's not like he hasn't been getting minutes. You know he's played at this level. He can step into it and give you the job that you need if you need to go to a four-man back line with Escobar on the right, LGP with your choice of Parkhurst or Pogba next to him, and Ambrose on the left. I think you're okay in that scenario.
Yeah.
But I don't think you pull Bello from the U17s. I don't think that happens at all.
But yeah, and you and I have had the chance to see Mikey get regular reps with Atlanta United too. And we've seen what he can do with Atlanta United as well. I mean, a lot of folks remember last year his combinations with Miguel Almiron down the left-hand side. So I think that if you have to go to a Mikey Ambrose with four at the back, I think that you're completely comfortable with that, knowing what we've seen from him in the past.
Yeah, I think it's possible if that's how you have to go, and we'll have to see how this plays out. Some other news on the playoff front before we take a break. Chris Armas is trying to play the everybody counts us out, nobody believes in us card.
Us against the world.
Well, they're finished sixth in the East. I mean, I do get it. He said to his team last week, the good news, guys, is that we love this time of year and everyone's counting us out. It's all there for us. We just know that when the whistle blows in a few weeks, it's game on, and for me, that's the beauty. Sure. Hey, when you finish sixth in the East, that's the card you get to play is nobody believes in us, because I don't know how many people believe in them, to be perfectly honest. I don't know, and it's funny when these things happen, because you know what Chris Armas is doing. But then people get really worked up about him saying that, well, nobody's counting them out. Well, people should be counting them out. I don't know if they are or not. I'm not doing a poll. But you finished sixth for a reason, and you're playing the team that finished third in Philadelphia, who is a better team than you.
Yep.
They're better. I love what Jim Curtin said about the match with the Red Bulls, and I want to give you this quote. They're going to high press us. They're a very good team, and we respect them a lot. But we have to approach the game and be fearless in that we're in our home stadium. The pressure for once is actually on us now. We're the favorite. That's a new role for us to play, and we have to do it in a way that's emblematic of Philadelphia, which is to be brave, to not be scared. They're kind of like a bully with the way that they play. They want to be physical. If you punch the bully in the nose, a lot of time it backs down. That has to be our mentality from the opening whistle. 100% agree. Jim Curtin nailed it with the approach here. If you come out and give it to the Red Bulls the way that they're going to do to you, I don't know if they're good enough to deal with that this season. I don't think they are. Philadelphia is a much better team. Now, the question marks with the Union, you've got one good answer, and Alejandro Bedoya was back in full training as of yesterday. One somewhat side-eye answer, Kasper Shabilko, he's still being held back in training. They're being conservative about it with the foot injury that kept him out of decision day. All the scans, all the work that they've done to check it, everything's coming back good. But they're being conservative with it. That still gives you some concern. You have options, but Kasper Shabilko is a borderline best 11 striker in this league. I think he's going to miss out on that because of the years that Vela, Zlatan, and Joseph have had. But Shabilko has been outstanding. You need him. You might not have him. They're saying you're going to have him. You still have to be a little concerned that he's not in full training at the moment.
I don't know if you would do Snickers or Almond Joys or whatever, but the early stuff going on from our friends at OddsShark have the final score looking more like 2-1 Philadelphia. Philadelphia on the money line minus 103.
It's way early. I'm going to wait on more on those injuries because there's still a lot of questions. I want some clarity before I start thinking about which piece of Halloween candy I'm going to use on that one. So we'll think about it. We'll take a break. We'll come back with some silly season updates. There's other rumors around MLS that we'll get to. We'll also get to some of your tweets on an overreaction Monday right after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinsky of Apolinsky & Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Welcome back. Final segment, hour number 1, SDH, October 14th. While John recovers from having his Mountain Dew go down the wrong pipe, I guess,
Yeah, that was bad. That's bad form early in the morning.
Yeah, you got to work on that. We get caught up on some silly season rumors from the weekend, and rumors/news, some innuendo mixed in. Portland Timbers, according to some reports out of Argentina, are linked to 2 young players from San Lorenzo. Nahuel Barrios is a 21-year-old winger. He's valued at $3 million. Recently broke into Argentina's U23s. Alexander Diaz is the other one. He's a 19-year-old striker. He's valued at just under $1 million. Hasn't really broken through at San Lorenzo yet. With the rumors about Valeri, with concern about Brian Fernandez, and concern about everything going forward for the Timbers, not surprised they're linked to young South American and young Argentine talent at all. Colorado's had Lalas Abubakar on loan from Columbus this season. Center back, he's played very well for the Rapids. They want to make it permanent, and according to Ben Ferree of Pro Soccer USA, they're ready to go up to about $1 million in allocation money to get a deal done. It feels like a lot, especially when you look at Iko Para going from Kansas City to Minnesota last year for $900,000. Abubakar is a very good young talent, but is he Iko Para? Not right now, he's not. And that's a big price tag. I don't know what kind of allocation money Colorado has. I don't know really what they've been spending it on, so they might have a nice stash. Maybe they had the money to make it work, but that feels like a big price tag. As good as he's been, that still feels like a big price tag. Chicago, they've got another designated player slot open now. Bastian Schweinsteiger retiring. Nemanja Nikolic writes a letter to the Chicago fans saying that he is leaving. That's 2 designated player spots available for the Fire as they move into Soldier Field, as they refresh the brand. All the reports are that they are not going to change the name. There could be a new logo, or at least an updated logo. It feels like it's going to be a brand new Chicago Fire next year. Now, the other question, and some last week thought that some of these different things pointed to Nelson Rodriguez, Veljko Paunovic being gone. Others, and The Athletic is on this side, and Sam Stajkal has reported this, that it looks like Rodriguez and Paunovic will be back with these types of announcements. Very interesting to see former Chicago Fire defender Lovell Palmer tweet yesterday that they need to move on from Nelson Rodriguez, and had a lot of personal opinions to say about it. I don't know. We talked about Chicago last week. The results have not been good with Rodriguez and Paunovic, but now you're going to have resources that maybe you didn't have before. Maybe with the right resources, you are talking about something different. I still think it's a big maybe. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in Chicago and how they recruit to fill these 2 designated player slots. Santiago Solari is mentioned as a possible manager for Orlando City. He was last at Real Madrid. Kind of a big deal. A very interesting thing about this, though. So, and you got to give credit to the Garlic Bread Warlord on this one, because I didn't see it anywhere else until Nick shared it with us. In Orlando, one of the podcasts that cover Orlando City discussed the reports from Spain that Solari could be headed to Orlando. Chris Coleman's wife on Twitter responded to the Orlando City podcast and was doing one of 2 things. Either suggesting that Coleman is a candidate or that he is interested in becoming a candidate. Okay. I don't know. I kind of like Chris Coleman. I mean, I think he's a good manager. I think he can be a good manager. He's one that could probably stand to rebuild his managerial reputation a little bit. Maybe MLS is the spot to do it. I don't know if Orlando is. We've had that conversation many times as well. But, if you're talking about a Solari, if you're talking about a Coleman, some of the other names that have been mentioned in Orlando, it does feel bigger than it's been in the past. That's for sure.
And I know that a lot of folks may remember Coleman from his cup of coffee at Sunderland, trying to get them out of the relegation fight in the series that ran on Prime Video. But he was last
that stuff more than me. But let me ask you, he went to China after that. But
yeah, Hebei China Fortune.
About Sunderland, Was there anything he could have done to save it at that point, or was it too far gone?
No, it was too far gone.
I got the sense of that, too. I think some have tried to hang that on Coleman, and I don't think it was.
No. I think if you're going to hang Sunderland on anybody, it's Ellis Short, the owner at the time. And the series painted a picture of Short basically abandoning any kind of investment and the front office having to do things with players on loan and not investing any capital to bring folks in. But Coleman, I mean, it was a great PR move. He won the presser and he got them close, but in the end they just ran out of gas. So no, I would not have hung the relegation of Sunderland on Chris Coleman one bit.
Final rumor, Vancouver, Anthony Blondell, you might have forgotten about him. He's been out on loan in Chile and done pretty well. Didn't do anything in Vancouver when he was signed. Young Venezuelan forward. Looks like he could be headed to Turkey, to Göztepe, for 1.4 million euro. And when you do the math, and Glass City FC bailed all of us out on doing all of said math, the Whitecaps paid 1.3 million for Blondell. His Venezuelan club retained 20% of the next transfer. So if you get 1.4 million euro and you start, looking at who gets what and how this goes down and transfer rates and all of that, it looks like Vancouver might basically break even. They might take a loss, according to this, of $63,324.34.
U.S. or Canadian?
Who knows? Probably U.S., but I don't know for sure. So anyway, it hasn't really worked out, but if they can recoup most of their money, you probably take that and move on.
Yeah, write that off.
Let's get into the Overreaction Monday timeline on Twitter before Jessica Charman joins us at the top of the hour. What are the folks reacting about?
Eric Hunter had an overnight overreaction. He says he's been wondering about MBS and natural grass for big FIFA matches. Have they released plans to make grass work in short-term situations? I know the Tottenham-style mechanism isn't an option because of the roof cover at MBS, but how genius is their grass-to-artificial plan?
It hasn't come up yet. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what kind of genius you're looking for here. I mean, generally, you put grass over top of the turf. It's pretty simple. I think what Tottenham is doing is a whole different conversation. And that would require a retrofitting of the whole stadium.
Yeah.
Could it be done? Yeah, possibly. It could. I don't know. I'm not in that field, so I don't know. But there's really not any other genius options. I mean, it kind of is what it is. Like you lay sod over the turf, and I think some places do it better than others. But it can generally be difficult to pull off. So I don't know. Now, if we're talking about something for a World Cup, well, obviously you've got a bigger plan and you've got a bigger window to do that, and you're having a completely different conversation for something that's not a one-off game. You're going to have to do it differently. For a one-off, I don't know. I don't really know what else you could do. It kind of is what it is.
J.C. Hillis is wondering who's better at wasting talented footballers, the men's national team or England?
Who has more talented footballers would be the question. And I think it's actually a fairly valid one. England probably has more of a pool, but do they have a whole lot of better players? I don't know. England did have a pretty good World Cup last year. I kind of remember that. What, am I imagining things?
No.
Where did they finish up in the World Cup last time?
I thought they were pretty close to the top.
That's what I was thinking. Now I know they lost to Czech Republic in a European Championship qualifier. That's an overreaction to kind of put them in that conversation with a team that didn't qualify. England, I think, has done a really good job of getting the most out of it, because you go back to the golden generation and that group couldn't get past a quarterfinal at a European Championship or a World Cup. This group, do they have the same type of talent as David Beckham, Steven Gerrard, Frank Lampard, Paul Scholes, Wayne Rooney? Probably not. I don't know if they have that type of talent right now. But they've gotten better results. And you have to give credit to Gareth Southgate. You have to give credit to everything that they have done, because I think they're getting more out of less. Now, you could have said before, and I would probably tend to agree, I think the expectations as a whole for England are generally too high, because when you look at overall talent, there's just countries with more. England is not as dominant in that regard as maybe we think they are, or the expectations for them have been. Now you're dealing with a different conversation for them after this past success. Now, we'll see what they do next summer at the Euros, because they're going to qualify. That's not an issue. They're going to qualify. How does it end up looking for them? Because I think you've got to make a semifinal. Like, now that's where your bar is. If you don't get to the semis, then people are going to have fairly valid questions. Some of it will be based off form. Some of it will be based off the draw. All those things will factor in. On the U.S. side, how many talented players are you wasting? That's the other question, because I think generally you get two different thoughts about the national team. They don't have enough good players, so it doesn't matter who the coach is, or they don't have enough good players, the talent's not good enough. Or the coach is horrible and they're not getting what they should. I think it's probably honestly somewhere in between, because I think the talent's better than it gets credit for. You don't have as many world-class players as in England. You don't have as many world-class players as a lot of countries. Christian Pulisic can be that. You have a lot of good players, and you have competition for spots that you've never really had before. You should have qualified for the last World Cup. You didn't because of managerial mistakes. First with Klinsmann and second with Arena. But right now, you are the number 2 team in Concacaf based off the last Gold Cup. I think you're number 2 based off if you look at CONCACAF right now and you look at the talent and you look at how teams have played. I think the U.S. is number 2. Should they be number 1 right now? You compare talent, Mexico to the U.S., I think Mexico's better at the moment.
Yep.
So I think they are about where they should be. Now they have to maintain that, and they have to get to the Mexico level before the next World Cup. That's the challenge for Greg Berhalter. That's the challenge for Ernie Stewart. And it's the challenge for the youth national team programs and all of the players who are coming through, which is where it ultimately stops, is the players have to deliver too. It's an interesting question. It's a weird one, because I think England is better maybe now than they've been in a long time, but they might not have as much talent as they had in previous cycles and years. The U.S. is, I think, about where they should be based off talent. And I think we all hope that they progress past that.
Yeah. It's what you do with the talent you have, regardless of number.
Yeah, but you also have to be fair in what your expectations are based off the talent.
True. Yeah, no doubt.
In the past, I think people thought England should be winning World Cups, and they just weren't the best team to do that. They just weren't. And right now, I don't know exactly what the expectation is with the U.S. in terms of comparing to Mexico. Is it be competitive? Is it no, they should be beating Mexico? Is it no, they have no chance against Mexico? I don't know. The conversation and the vibe around the U.S. men's national team is very confusing at the moment, which is understandable after not qualifying for a World Cup. That's what happens. But I hope it settles into something reasonable very soon, and I hope we can figure out, and hopefully the national team program's already doing this, what the strategic plan is to be the best team in CONCACAF and to be a team that can get to a semifinal of a World Cup, because that needs to be the goal. We'll see what happens. We're going to take a break. We're going to get Jessica Sharman's thoughts on that, on the women's national team news with Vlatko Andonovski, with MLS and the playoffs getting ready, and any other questions you guys might have. So throw them at us on Twitter at @SoccerDownHere. We'll be right back.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
You're listening to Soccer Down Here daily on SDH Networks, a division of OSG Sports. Find us at Soccer Down Here on Facebook and Twitter. The time is now the top of the hour. Peep, y'all.
Welcome back. Hour number 2, SDH, October 14th. The sun is out. It's starting to warm up. It's been very cold the last couple of days, at least based off the 95-degree days we've been getting used to. I called 2 matches yesterday with our next guest. We were able to stay out of the rain. It still was a little chilly, and I think she might have her voice. I'm not 100% sure. Jessica Sharman joins us right now. What's up, Jess?
You know, just recovering, having some warm water to get my voice back and flowing.
Get you some, hot tea, the throat coat. That's always good stuff to go to. Yeah.
You know the irony? I'm English and I hate tea. It's fascinating. A lot of people don't agree with that. I don't fit the stereotype perfectly, but it was a great weekend of games, Jason. We saw a lot of goals for 4 matches over the last 3 days.
Yeah, I mean, when Oglethorpe's men win 9-0 Friday night and then 8-1 yesterday, and it wasn't like competition was in a different class. It was Oglethorpe playing that well and scoring really good goals. It was a fun one.
It was definitely. And then the women did well too. So it's fun when you're calling exciting quality teams, and hopefully Atlanta United lives up to the expectations that we've come to get used to in Brookhaven this weekend.
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to score 9 or 8. We'll see about that. But let's get your thoughts on the last question, because as I kind of tried to spin my way through it, I think it's a really difficult comparison between where the U.S. program is and England's program. I don't know if you can even really put them in the same paragraph or chapter or book.
Yeah, it was a bit of an apples and oranges question. I understand the meaning behind the question, and that both teams have potentially had players that haven't ever fulfilled their potential, or squads that are underachieving, but I think they're underachieving potentially on different levels or on different stages. For instance, England have often been expected to win a World Cup. The US maybe haven't been in that question. People aren't unrealistic in terms of the US men's national team winning a World Cup, but they're disappointed, for instance, when they don't qualify for a World Cup.
See, here's my question, though. Has it been unfair to expect England to win a World Cup since they did
absolutely.
In 1966?
Absolutely. We're crazy, the English. When it comes to football,
I didn't say it.
I did. 100%.
She can. She has permission to do so.
It's so weird in England coming up to a World Cup year, because what happens is, at least from my stage growing up in the World Cups that I've been around for, about a year before, you're like bummed out about it. Oh, we're going to underachieve. We might not even get out the group. And then it's the day before the game, and suddenly we're favorites. Suddenly we're going to win a World Cup, and we put ourselves through it every time. And this World Cup was actually the one where I think people were most realistic. And when there wasn't that same pressure until the semi-final, I think it really helped the players because they played with less of a weight on their shoulders. When you play for the English national team, there's always this crazy level of expectation. And I think it's bound to affect the players mentally because they're not stupid. They do see the social media, they see the media reaction, and they have a lot of pressure because anything less than a semi-final sometimes is seen as a failure. And we haven't had the best teams ever. I think the one that strikes me as the one that was the most wasted generation would be the golden generation. But when you break it down, we had a lot of quality individuals, but that was the issue. It was a lot of individuals. You had someone like David.
Position.
Yeah. And players that were stubborn in where they played. Michael Owen is a brilliant forward, but he's selfish. And Wayne Rooney, a brilliant forward, but Wayne Rooney actually has developed as a player, I think, and seeing him at DC United, he was the most team-oriented Wayne Rooney I'd ever seen because it used to be that the system around England had to feed Wayne Rooney the ball and had to be centralized around Wayne Rooney, and you can't always do that. And when it wasn't like that, it was a problem. David Beckham is a hero and is always going to be considered one of the best ever for England. But at the end of the day, what was he great at? He was good at free kicks and he was good at early crosses. But was he a centre midi? No. Did he want to play centre midi? Yeah. And then to cap it all off with the golden generation, you have Sven-Göran Eriksson as the coach. And let's be honest, Sven wasn't ever suited to the English managerial position. And that's why I think Gareth Southgate right now is the right fit. And do we have the best players being produced? Maybe not. But do we have a coach that's getting the best out of them? Are they young? Are they fearless? Do they maybe have a slightly worn down English supporter base that are a bit more realistic after years of disappointment? Yeah. But my fear right now is with the English mentality, with the Euros coming up, is that expectation different from the World Cup now? And is that going to be a detrimental thing?
Here's the biggest mistake in the Sven era for me. They kept throwing Paul Scholes out wide and to the point that he left the program. And Paul Scholes is the player that you could not lose in that program at all.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When you don't manage players and you don't explain stuff to them or you don't play them in the role they're suited at to the extent that they don't want to play and represent their country anymore, you know you have an issue with your man management. And that's something that's always concerning. You don't want players turning down call-ups as we've seen lately, and it's not a good thing.
How much of a difference has Gareth Southgate meant to the national team? Because it's refreshing to see what he brings to the table, both on the field, on the touchline, in game, and when you're asking him for sound bites and things like that. But when it comes to strategy and the way things are laid out during matches, how much of a difference has it been having Southgate there?
I mean, we won a penalty shootout in a big competition, so I think that was a big deal. And Southgate has that. He's represented the country. He understands what it means to wear the three lions. He understands the pressure that comes with it, the expectation of the fans. And I think that way he can manage and sort of control that with his player base. I think he's inspiring the sort of family mentality. I don't know if either of you have read up, but Raheem Sterling, I believe it was, has quoted that they play Bulgaria tonight, or 2:45 US time. And Bulgaria is a famously hostile place to go, and that's the potential of the racism. And they've decided as a team that if there is any sign of racist behavior, that everyone is going to walk off the field, and they don't care about the consequences. And Gareth Southgate has gone ahead and, agreed that that's the way to handle it. So I think it's cool that they've got that unity. And I think Gareth Southgate, coming from a position of experience, having represented the team, has done that. And it's easier for me as a player. I always wanted to play under someone that could understand the circumstance you're in, understands the pressures, understands the weight on your shoulders, understands the team that you're playing for. So I'm not someone that believes that a national team has to be coached by someone from that country. but I believe that they need to have represented or understand what it is to represent a country. And it just happens to be perfect that Southgate has fitted that role perfectly and represented England.
So there were a lot of questions when Gareth Southgate was hired. There were a lot of questions on the women's side when Phil Neville was hired. Now some of the questions on Phil Neville have come back after some disappointing results after the World Cup. And it seems like Neville's maybe struggling a little bit with the criticism. How do you feel about where the England women are? We talked about the U.S. in that situation with looks like they've settled on the next manager. You've got Olympics to deal with. For England, the Olympics are a very different situation than the U.S. will be facing. How do you feel about Phil Neville right now?
So I think it's a hard one coming off what was a really disappointing World Cup in the end, because it was brilliant and England took the US toe and nail, but I think they were really disappointed with how things ended up and that they didn't get that result against the US, and it was their best opportunity so far to win the Women's World Cup. Neville, a lot of his criticism early on stemmed from some really stupid comments that he made about the position of women and whatnot, and he was always going to have that chip on his shoulder. Right now, it's his managerial experience and ability that's going on. I do think they're trying to change things up. If you look at the call-ups, they are playing new players, younger players. They've had some disappointing results. It is always difficult after a World Cup to rebuild and decide whether it's you're ending on that note or you're trying to keep the core of the squad. But I do think, like you say, the Olympics is huge, because for England, it's a chance to get some silverware, and they'll be looking to sort of dethrone the US and go far. But right now, how they're playing, it's not inspiring. It's not exciting. The games I've watched, they got lucky to pick up a win in the last game. It was a goalkeeper error that put them 1-up. And it's not good enough when you're beating Portugal 1-0. And that's we talked, Jason, all the way through the Women's World Cup about how teams are getting closer, how that's a fantastic thing. But if England's trying to make themselves a powerhouse, they can't be struggling to win against a team that didn't qualify for the Women's World Cup.
Right. Now, explain a little bit about the process, and I don't know what the conversation's been just yet. It's another Team GB in the Olympics, but Neville will be in charge of it, and would assume that the majority of the players will be from England, but maybe not all.
Yeah, so when it comes to the Olympics, you're under GB and Northern Ireland flag. So it's going to be, I believe, right? That is what it is. I'm figuring out. But it basically means that you can choose players from England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. So it becomes a really interesting mix of players that haven't always played against each other. What's going to be really interesting is obviously Scotland and England played each other in the World Cup groups. And it may be that some of these players that had some drama, I remember some VAR drama in that matchup, end up now playing together. What is an advantageous thing about that is most of these players play on similar teams in the domestic leagues. A lot of the Scottish players do play in the Women's Super League. And like you say, I would see the majority of players being from the English team, but I could see someone like Erin Cuthbert getting a call up from Scotland, a couple of other players potentially. If I'm a Scot or a Welsh woman, I'm a little bit disappointed, though, because realistically, your chance of getting called up, even if you deserve it, are probably less so, because the coach is going to want to use the Olympics as a stage to keep building his national team. And therefore, I would say the chances are that the majority of the players are going to be his usual women's side.
You mentioned how things are for the Three Lions, and there's obviously been the talk this morning that Andonovski may be the guy who's going to be the new coach for the U.S. women's side. According to Grant Wall over at SI, U.S. soccer spokesperson says they haven't made a final decision. Nothing is confirmed as yet. But for whomever takes this job, it's going to be a team in transition, and it's transition on a bunch of different levels. You have you have an individual, whoever that is, replacing a legend on the touchline. Then you're talking about philosophy, and you're talking about a team that is getting older in the tooth and trying to bring in that next wave of players. So whoever takes this gig, and it looks like it's going to be Andonovski, is forced with a very tough challenge in replacing a legend.
Yeah, it's a tough one. No one ever really wants to follow the boots. And it's a weird comparison, but look at Man United. No one wanted to follow Sir Alex Ferguson because it's impossible to follow someone that's won World Cups, that's achieved everything with the team. Maybe Ellis had the most criticism of her career during the World Cup. There were some concerns about the way the US was playing, so potentially that softens the transition a little bit. But I like Andonovski. I think he was a centre-back as a player, and that's something the US needs. If we had any criticisms about the way the US women's national team played, particularly in the World Cup, it was about their defensive play, looking volatile at the back, maybe not playing out the back at the right times or overdoing it. So I think getting someone that's defensive minded in is really important. Some people might be a little surprised that it's not a woman taking over. Oftentimes people prefer to try and find a female coach, but at least Andonovski has that experience in the female game and in the female US game in the NWSL. That sort of means that he already knows a lot of these players that he can work with. Potentially has already scouted out some fresh blood, because that's what the US women's national team needs. But I think that defensive priority and that defensive mind is what the US needs to regain. Well, they are the powerhouse. They won the World Cup, but sort of restore that claim over that title, because our biggest concerns for them during the World Cup was the sort of lackadaisical defending at times, and they always looked like conceding.
So let's get into more defensive talk. Miles Robinson left the U.S. men's national team camp, hamstring injury. How concerning is that for you about Atlanta United this weekend?
I mean, it's obviously very concerning. We don't know the extent of the injury right now, but any time that a muscle gets strained, you don't want to risk it. And the style that Miles Robinson plays, he's not a defender that is about short runs. He's a defender that makes those sprints, that makes the recovery runs, that will be 1 minute on the left side of the pitch, 1 minute on the right attacking side of the pitch. So he needs his hamstrings. It's a lot of pressure on those muscles, and it's one of those where you don't want to do it too soon, because next thing a strain becomes much worse than that. It becomes a tear. You never know. It's knock on wood that doesn't happen, but you can't rush muscular injuries, particularly when, if you win this game, you have another game, and maybe it's best to rest there. It's concerning, though, because Miles, like you guys have said earlier on in the show, has been an absolute starter for Atlanta United and has been a pivotal player that's actually offered a safety net in the back. Because when you have a player like LGP that has some interesting decisions sometimes going forward, or some rush of the bloods to the head, it's always been Miles Robinson that's been back there with his athleticism, with his reading of the game, that's been able to cover it. That said, maybe it works in our favor because of that unpredictability that you have talked so greatly about this morning already.
And obviously you look at the team coming in, and it was what we talked about in the first hour, where now New England has to prepare for more than one eventuality. Mm-hmm. And it ends up being a good thing just to have it out there in the ether for the wrong reason. But now New England's going to have to prepare for, a 3-5-2, a 4, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Just
You're
4 at the
back,
back, 5 at the back. Yeah. So,
when
you get to do that. Yeah.
It's a good thing, because particularly with the teams having played so recently, New England were probably thinking they'd learned some lessons. And maybe if Atlanta United played exactly the same way as they did in season, they'd sussed it out a little bit, or they're preparing for that. Now they don't know. And I think Jason mentioned earlier that I doubt Frank's going to give any solid answer at all before the game. It'll be when the lineup sheet comes out that New England knows who they're facing. And it's a smart thing, particularly since the teams have met so recently. It gives Atlanta United that little bit of unpredictability against a team that may have already come up with some tactics. And now in practice, a lot of times teams before a game will practice phases of play based on the team that they're playing against and the way they want to play. Well, they're going to have to do lots of different options, because they're going to have to prepare against playing against different shapes, because they don't know what shape Atlanta United's going to play.
All right, we're less than a week away from the playoffs getting started. This is the first round. Higher seeds are at home. It's one game knockout. There will be upsets. Not exactly sure where they're going to come yet. When you look at the matches this weekend, and it starts with Atlanta and New England Saturday at 1 o'clock, Seattle hosting Dallas Saturday 3:30, Toronto hosting DC Saturday at 6, Real Salt Lake hosting Portland Saturday night at 10, 2 matches on Sunday, Philly hosting the Red Bulls and Minnesota hosting the Galaxy. who is at the greatest risk of being upset at home out of those first-round matches, in your opinion?
It's a tough one. Maybe Philly with the Red Bulls. I don't know. I think that the Red Bulls always have something crazy in them. I think they have really underachieved this season. I heard you talk about their coach talking about trying to rally up his troops with
classic
everyone overlooking them. We are the underdog.
Everyone's counting us out.
Every coach has done it, though. I've been guilty of playing the underdog card before because sometimes it's nice to try and rally up the troops. I'll go with that one. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Philly have enough power and that it's a great place to go play in terms of their home fortress. I think sometimes the home advantage is underlooked by people, but it's definitely a real thing. But who knows? Maybe the Red Bulls will make a charge.
I was looking at possibly Portland at Real Salt Lake, just because you're always wondering about the Portland offense. And I know the questions late in the year that we had with Portland, but I was looking at Portland and RSL out west, in addition to your Red Bulls gambit.
LA Galaxy in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Because Zlatan can go crazy.
But but I think with the 4v5, as much as the home advantage is there, because it's such a close one with a 4 versus 5, that's the one that's always most likely to get thrown.
Yeah, Toronto, DC, I don't feel that way as much. I think Toronto's a bigger favorite at home than Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
And
you're right.
It's just the presence of Zlatan. I mean, it could just be that. I mean, he can make something happen out of absolutely nothing. Now, Minnesota could score 3 or 4 goals as well, and he might have to score 5, but I'm not putting it past him.
That's what's terrifying.
Him and Pavone, that's a really good attack.
But, Manone and net, maybe he'll have a worldie because we saw him in the Open Cup. He made that one sort of misjudgment for the goal, but then he had a really good game. So
you mentioned Vito Manone, and we know the connection with Reading. Do you have thoughts on Reading's new manager that you would like to share?
Oh, it's the worst. I couldn't believe it, honestly. There were some bad candidates out there. Roy Keane was one of the suggestions, and that one made me sick to my stomach. I couldn't imagine a club like Reading in Royal Berkshire being managed by Roy Keane. But on the flip side now, if anyone doesn't know the backstory, just to keep it simple, I know Reading's not always in the news. But
come on.
we were getting it more on the forefront. Jose Gomez, a Portuguese manager, kept us up last year when it looked like we were going to be down. Had a pretty bad start to the season, but we were playing well. Got fired. Someone that had a really big influence in that was the director of football, Bowen. Bowen has never managed a team. He's always been an assistant. Now Bowen is the manager. So there's a bit of a Judas Snake moment there where the guy that kind of pushed the firing and had an influence in the firing is now the manager. We'll see how things go, but it's hard when I don't know if I as a player would feel great about playing for a manager that maybe betrayed the last manager. 4th
manager in a year and a half.
Yeah, it's been a bad series of play, and a lot of people remember it was us that were in the playoff final just, 2 seasons ago. We're in a playoff final and lost on penalties to Huddersfield. And now we're struggling in, I think, one place outside the relegation zone, a new manager. It's not bright for Reading right now. Thankfully, I have Atlanta United to cushion that blow a little bit.
3rd from the bottom without a win in 6, facing Preston at home on Saturday.
And it's one of those where maybe we get that new manager buzz. We often hear about those, but as you see with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, those don't last too long.
Maybe you'll get it at least temporarily, though. It lasted for a little while with Ole.
Yeah. But then things hit the fan. The polite.
Okay, let me ask you about that, though. Because we've had this conversation on Soccer Over There a lot when it comes to Manchester United. I've come around to the line of thinking that it doesn't matter who's in charge right now at Manchester United. They're going to have problems. I don't think they have a good enough squad to compete where people think they should. It goes back to that whole thing about wasting talent and what expectations should be and what they actually are. Mm-hmm. I mean, would it matter if it was Mourinho who had stayed, if it was Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, if it was anybody else you want to name, if Mauricio Pochettino had left Spurs and come to Manchester United with this group, would it have made a difference?
I don't think so, because I think there's too much poison in the locker room, and it's not the manager that's handling that. There's some players that have a lot of talent but aren't necessarily having the mental game or the team spirit to play, and I just think that there's not anyone that could rally up the troops well. And like you say, it's not a good enough team. I just actually, before we got on, was reading an article from Danny Mills, and he creates a best 11 for the Liverpool-Man United game of his starting lineup. Well, guess what? Not a single Man United player made that starting lineup.
No, there shouldn't be.
I think the only player that stands out at the moment is, I think, Harry Maguire's had a decent season for a tough team. He had his dream boyhood move, and it's not really gone how he would have liked it. But they're just not a good enough side. And then you talk about expectation. If you thought England international people had high expectations, Man United just are on another level. And you understand why. They were the best team in the world for the longest, undefeatable and stuff like that. But now you just have to look at the quality of squad player to player matchups. And they complain about losing to teams that have just been promoted. But when you do the matchup between each player, honestly, the quality and the talent isn't there.
No, I don't think it is. I think Mauricio Pochettino, obviously we saw what he did at Spurs last year. Maybe he'd get more, but how much more? I mean, it feels like there's a very low ceiling for where Manchester United is right now.
And you just see how football changes, though, because Pochettino now isn't everyone's favorite manager either. It's crazy how tides change with football. You can have the same squad in front of you. For Solskjaer, it's a tough one. I think he'll stay for longer just based on who he is. And it's tough, though. I think he's probably clutching at straws at what more he can do until the transfer window.
Yeah, it's a really awkward situation. It's expectations and reality are an interesting battle in this world, and they hardly ever truly line up in a realistic way. It seems like one is way out of whack when it comes to these expectations for some clubs, especially clubs that have been there or programs that have been there before, whether it's England's national team, Manchester United. Now we're seeing that with Atlanta United, and now we're seeing expectations be huge after the success they've had in a couple short years.
History always comes to haunt you in some ways. It's amazing to have a brilliant history. Even though the World Cup win was before I was born, it's amazing to be someone that comes from a country that's won a World Cup. It's prestigious. But at the same time, you have to realize that with the average career of a soccer player being, 15 years in their prime, there's such a high level of turnover. And the average time a player spends at a club these days is 2 years sometimes. The turnover is so huge that you can't expect these series of achievement to last as long as the players' careers. It changes. And if you lose one or two fantastic players, or you lose a manager retires, it has a bigger influence than people think. The club at the end of the day is a name, a logo, a location. It may have a history, but that history doesn't always equate to the present now.
It's going to be a busy week. Make sure you're following Jess Talks Footy on Twitter for all of her takes. And then you guys have the Soccer Over There weekend preview coming up Thursday, Friday, correct?
Correct.
Has it got a name yet, John?
No, it's still a show with working title.
Somebody help us. Name the show, please.
But, Soccer Over There weekend preview. It's fun to catch up with Nick and Jess. And Jess and I get to talk about not just the Prem, but the championship. And, obviously looking at the table, I know, Jess, one of the topics you and I will talk about Thursday is the fact that teams from the Prem are near the bottom of the championship. Stoke, Reading, Huddersfield, Middlesbrough, Wigan, and Hull, all 16 through 24.
Shocking times when money rules football.
Yep, cash rules everything around me. Wu-Tang had it correct.
Oh, there you go.
They did.
Wu-Tang on a Monday.
They were right. Just saying. Thanks, Jess. Talk to you later this week.
Thank you very much. Talk to you then.
Be good.
We're going to take a quick break, jump back into the Twitter timeline right after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service Ad Council and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinsky of Apolinsky and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Welcome back. Soccer Down Here, October 14th edition. It's an overreaction Monday, and even without MLS matches to react to, we have a lot of reactions. So let's get into the overreaction Monday hashtag on Twitter.
Reaction from Bartimus Prime. And Bart went to the attendance figures that were posted at Soccer Stadium Digest for his overreaction for the morning. Attendance numbers for the 2019 season are disappointing. Overall attendance averaged 21,310 and just under 8.7 million total. A league-wide drop of 0.03%, but an overall increase of 142,000 plus. Even adding Cincinnati, the league dropped in average attendance. Biggest culprits, Chicago and Minnesota, both down 0.2%, 0.1%. Vancouver. Minnesota obviously moved into a significantly smaller stadium. Also, why does Houston only draw 15,000 a game? Hashtag do better, hashtag guerrilla marketing.
All right, let's just go from top to bottom. So Atlanta United, Seattle Sounders, pretty much a wash. FC Cincinnati comes in year one, averages 27,336 at Nippert. Now, when they move into their new stadium, that's going to go down a little bit because I think it's 26.5. If I'm not mistaken, might be 25. It's going to go down a little bit. It's okay. Portland went up. They added seats. They sold everything out all the time, so it went up because they added seats, up 19%. Toronto, down 6%. You're coming off of a year where you only won the Canadian Championship. You didn't make the playoffs. Slow-ish start this season. You also had the Giovinco stuff that was a soap opera. You had the Victor Vasquez departure. I think Toronto will be okay. I think their drop is because of last season and some weird things in the media this season when it came to Giovinco. LA Galaxy, down slightly, which is a little surprising. Down 5%. Don't know why that is. They've been somewhat entertaining, at least. A lot of goals. You still have Zlatan, but they've had some bad results, too. Maybe that's it. I don't know. Down 5%. That's one that I'm kind of curious about. Orlando only being down 5% is probably a win with as bad as they've been as of late.
Yeah.
If they're better, they're going to draw more. I think it's that simple when it comes to Orlando. LAFC's a wash, selling out. It is what it is. New York City down 9%. That's incredibly concerning because they've been better than they've ever been this season on the field. The Yankee Stadium experience is not great. Without any updates on what's going to be after Yankee Stadium, I think people are getting frustrated. That's a huge issue. NYC being down 9% is the team in the top 10 that's the most concerning, because there's not really an easy-to-fix reason for it. Minnesota down 17%. That's because they're in a smaller venue, flat out. They averaged almost 24,000 at the University of Minnesota. They're selling out everything at Allianz Field, but that only gets you to 19,723. That's why they're down. Vancouver down 11%. Well, they were awful. Easy. They were bad, and they also had a lot of PR issues throughout the season. I think they have solved those. I think they are heading in the right direction. We'll see if they're heading in the right direction on the field. That is what's keeping them down, that combination of things. San Jose, down slightly, down 1%. You're down to 18.7 from 19.032, so basically a wash. Sporting Kansas City down 7%. The season they've had, it's somewhat understandable. Real Salt Lake down 3%. Basically a wash. We're talking about 500 people. With that narrow of a margin, I don't know what questions to raise about it. I guess I'm a little surprised because they're a fun team to watch. DC's been a wash. Red Bulls down 7%. I'm surprised it's not more. I think Red Bulls in Orlando, actual people in the building, is down more than the percentages here. Again, it doesn't make any sense. They've been winning. They're coming off a supporter shield. I don't think Tyler Adams is the reason why 1,400 less people were buying tickets. I really don't. So why are they down at this point? Why are they putting tarps up? Why is the supposed construction movement growing at Red Bull Arena? I have no idea. I don't know. They've got to figure that out. Philadelphia up slightly. They've been a better team. Makes sense. New England down 9% overall, but was up a good bit towards the end. I think New England will be fine with a good team. Gillette Stadium's not the ideal location. It's not the ideal setup, but ownership owns it right now. You're not losing money there. And when they're drawing 25 to 30,000 a game, when they're good, it becomes a good spot to be in. Montreal down 13%. Well, they've been bad for a while. That's something that's got to get fixed. And I think if they have a good product, Montreal will draw. And Montreal will be a great place when they have a good product to follow. Stejkal's piece at The Athletic was outstanding on Montreal soccer culture. And I just think they need a winner. I just think they need something to be excited about. Houston down from already a disappointing number, down 7%. I'm with Bart on it. Houston's got to be better drawing with the team that they've had. But I think they're also at the point where they've got to make a signing that excites people, whether it's the manager and a player, or at least a player. They've got to do something because they should be drawing more than they do. Columbus is up from a bad number. They're not up as much as they should be. They're not up as much as they will be. They were up 19% from a hideous number in 2018, which nobody knew if they were coming back, so it's understandable. That has to continue to go. That has to continue to jump. Dallas was down slightly from already a bad number. Another one that Dallas has got to figure something out. They have to figure something out about the situation. I'm not going to say that this is definitely related, but I did find it very, very interesting that North Texas SC next year is moving into the ballpark at Arlington, which is the former home of the Texas Rangers. Is there anything else that's going to be in there? I want to say there was something else that was moving in there.
I think the XFL team is playing in there.
That's it. So they're trying to fill this venue. You're not going to have baseball there anymore, so you're going to be able to do some different things to it. I'm wondering if that's possibly a let's see what this could look like. I'm really curious about that. I don't know Dallas geography that well. I'm assuming it's closer to Dallas proper than Frisco, but how much and how much does it help? I don't know. I think it would help. Frisco's definitely part of it with FC Dallas.
Yeah.
It's definitely an element to why they don't draw. Would a move to the ballpark at Arlington fix that? I don't know. But North Texas moving there to play USL League One, I don't think was by accident. I don't think it was a random thing.
No, and you can, right. I mean, and the ballpark at Arlington is also across the river in the parking lot from AT&T Stadium. So any fan that knows how to get there for Dallas Cowboys games,
okay,
you're kind of, it's like a mile away. So literally anybody who's in that Cowboys orbit, you're sitting there and going, oh yeah, just over the bridge is Globe Life Park. And so no, I completely understand this as a tire kicking move for FC Dallas.
I think so. Bottom two teams in the MLS standings table or attendance table, Colorado Rapids. They were hideous last year. They were hideous to start this year. I'd have to look at, did the attendance start to come back towards the end? I think it will as they get better. It was 15-3 last year. It was 14-2 this year. They need to be in that 16-17 type of region next year with a better product. That's, I think, what you're looking at for growth with Colorado. Chicago will be up. I mean, Chicago, let's see. What is affecting Chicago's attendance to make them the lowest drawing team in the league in 2019? They've been awful.
Choice D, all of the above.
All of it. They've been awful. There was rumors for most of the season about them leaving Bridgeview. There was PR fighting with supporters groups. All of it. So you're in Soldier Field. That should give you a bump. You're going to sign to, I would assume, fairly high-profile designated players. That should give you a bump. They won't be at the bottom next year. I think you're probably looking at some combination of Dallas and Houston at the bottom next year, and that's not okay. That needs to change. So Bart's reaction was that it's disappointing. I don't know if I would go disappointing. I wouldn't say very disappointing. I mean,
take it case by case. There are disappointing elements in it. Let's put it that way.
Overall, it's about what it is. I don't have any massive issues with the overall numbers. There are definitely some disappointing individual numbers that need to change. And if they don't, you're going to start asking questions about ownership, about strategic plans, about marketing, about strategy of player recruitment, about all the different things that can affect attendance. And for some, it's going to be location. Look, Chicago, moving from a soccer-specific stadium that they helped build in Bridgeview back into Soldier Field in the city into a big venue, I don't think they're going to be the only one who looks at that kind of move. It's been rumored with Philadelphia. There's a great piece from Pablo Maurer at The Athletic talking about that. You've got Dallas kicking the tires in Arlington. I don't think that is a definite thing. I think what we've learned is soccer-specific stadiums can be great. Location is very, very important. And if you don't have the proper location, you're going to have more issues. Now, the flip side when it comes to Chicago is they drew at Bridgeview when they had a great team. That also plays into it because, okay, your team's at the bottom of the table. Chicago, awful, no playoffs. Colorado, awful to start, awful last year, better to end, no playoffs. Dallas, number 7 in the West, barely getting into the playoffs. Columbus, no playoffs. Houston, no playoffs. Montreal, no playoffs. New England is next, number 7 in the East. That's 18-24 in attendance. Production on the field relates to this. It has a huge impact. And that's any sport in the world. If you're a good team, people will find a way to get to you and come see you. If you're a bad team, people will come up with excuses not to go see you. And if there are reasons why it's difficult, like driving out to Bridgeview or driving out to Frisco or driving out to Dick's Sporting Goods Park, well, That's why Dallas, Colorado, and Chicago are the bottom three.
Mm-hmm. And disposable income these days, folks are monitoring how they spend their money. And if there's a bad product and it's going to take a while to get there to go watch a bad product, you're not going to invest. Bottom line.
Absolutely. I mean, it's that simple. So the teams that are struggling with attendance put a better product on the field. But I'm curious about these location issues as well. I want to see what happens with Dallas. I'm very curious about Philadelphia and where that could go. I think MLS is looking at also the top end of that and seeing what Atlanta's doing in a big venue, what Seattle's doing in a big venue, and what Cincinnati did in a big venue. I mean, with a bad team. Like, yeah, you had the expansion year. Yeah, you had excitement. But, man, they were a bad team to watch at times. But in a bigger venue, yeah, you're going to have more seats to sell. You have to also rise to that challenge with the product you put on the field. And New England is an example of that. So I'm intrigued by a lot of different things when it comes to the attendance. I'm intrigued more than I'm disappointed overall. That's where I would put it. That's my Monday reaction.
Because I'm intrigued because you have teams doing things. If they were stagnant and staying in their current stadia and not trying to think proactively about how to fix the situation or how to improve the situation, pick your verb, then I would be more concerned. But you're seeing some activity there. You're seeing some proaction about going into larger places, and now you've got to put the winning product on the field to attract folks after that initial, hey, we're in the larger stadium bump. So that's how I'm looking at it.
100%.
Chris Ashley, who is probably at some point going to lobby about coming on the show again this Friday.
That'll happen.
His overreaction is in all caps. And I'm not going to. Yeah, so he goes, at GVL Triumph, and the rest is in all caps. Do not take how I read this as how it's translated. Is in the championship. John Harkes is a national treasure. I'm going to Texas Bay Bay. And there are 7 Ys at the end of that tweet.
That's not an overreaction. That's very cool. Greenville went up to Lansing and won their semifinal. North Texas took care of business against Forward Madison.
Ricardo Pepi is a bad man.
He's a bad boy, I might go
man.
With. Yes.
Bad young man.
Yes. 16 years old, scoring 2 goals for North Texas, gets them into the final. They'll host it in Frisco. Greenville's got to go on the road again and try to take care of business again. But they've had the best defense in the league for most of this season. So if anybody can go into Frisco and handle North Texas, I think Greenville has the best opportunity to do so. So, yes, we will talk to Chris Ashley later in the week and get his thoughts as he gets ready to head out to Frisco and watch the Greenville Triumph play for a championship.
Dallas J between the sticks has been critical, crucial, and otherwise vital to their entire season.
Yes.
Joey Logan apparently can't wait to see half-empty stadiums for playoff games, especially those Tuesday, Wednesday games.
I have to disagree, Joey, because when you look historically at it, there hasn't been a problem with attendance on those. I think there's always a perception that midweek games draw horribly, and in some cases they do, especially when we're talking about Houston, Columbus, Dallas, Colorado, Chicago. Well, Dallas won't be hosting a playoff game because they're the number 7 seed. If they get past Seattle, then they'll just be very happy to move on. None of the rest of them are in the playoffs. New England can't host a playoff game. That's the next one. Philadelphia would be one, but that would mean Atlanta would have been upset, and Philadelphia hosting a game midweek would be maybe a question, but look at what their attendance was down the stretch. Very, very good. You know, they're on decision day, they drew 18,500. That was about 1,500 more than their season average and 2,000 more than what they drew last year. So I think there's been this perception in the playoffs about the midweek games don't draw. In recent years, the TV ratings have been comparable when it's been midweek versus weekend, and the attendance has been about the same when it's been midweek versus weekend. I think where there's been issues, it's teams that have attendance issues, period. It's not about being midweek. So if we look at it and project it out, let's just go chalk for the sake of going chalk first. When you're looking at who would be hosting midweek next week, Atlanta, no problems. Seattle, I wouldn't expect there to be problems.
Yeah.
New York City, well, could
problem.
Be.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the problem to you?
Well, if it's New York City, with the Yankees still going on, is it going to be at City? Is it going to be at Yankee Stadium?
It would be at City. That's an easy answer. They've already said that. It would be at Citi Field if the Yankees are still going on. But what is a number that is a problem for you? Their average attendance when it comes to New York City, they were 9th in the league at 21,100. Last year they drew 23,211. If they draw over 20,000 for a midweek playoff game, is that a problem?
No, but I just still see them playing at City and not getting to 20. I just don't.
Why do you think they would draw so much less at City as opposed to Yankee Stadium?
It's completely and totally superficial. I mean, it is fans going to Queens as opposed to going to the Bronx, not being interested in doing something like that. It's all of those superficial reasons, and then midweek, and then everybody's attention also being pushed at the Yankees where all of the eyeballs are. So it's everybody's looking at the Yankees in the postseason. NYCFC to me would be an afterthought, and the fact that they would be at number 2 in that order. And then you have the Rangers going and the Knicks in preseason and all this kind of stuff. They're falling further and further down the line, and they're playing in Queens.
See, the thing is, I disagree about the concern with the Yankees in terms of attention. I don't know how much of a crossover there actually is. I think this always comes up, whether it's Atlanta United in college football or whoever and whatever, that it's going to take away. I don't think the core NYC audience is crossing over between the two. Now, here's the contingencies about NYC moving to Citi Field. By the way, the other midweek game, if chalk happens, would be, LAFC will host one. I don't think Bank of California is going to have any problem drawing. So no, I think the midweek games will be okay. The biggest question is Citi Field and NYC. Now, give me an update, because I am not up on the baseball playoffs. I threw them away in the trash when the Braves capitulated, sadly.
that 10-0 that we were watching from Fifth Third.
Yes, that was bad. What is the situation for the Yankees at the moment?
Efforting your postseason run. So, as of right now, the series is tied at a game apiece.
Okay, so what do they have upcoming that is definitely scheduled? So you've got 3 more games that are definitely going to be played, no matter what. Here is the contingency that NYC has said. If the Yankees lose to the Astros in 4 or 5 games, which is still in play right now, then they don't go to Citi Field. They play at Yankee Stadium. If they lose in 5 games, that's the only thing left for a contingency. If it gets past the 5th game of the series, they go to Citi Field on October 24th at 7 o'clock. If the Yankees go to the World Series, then the Eastern Conference Final would also go to Citi Field.
Yep. World Series in the American League Park is 22, 23.
It's already done.
29.
It's going.
And
if they're in the World Series, NYC goes. It doesn't matter anything else. If they make it to the World Series, then NYC goes to Citi Field. That's a definite. Players have said they played at Citi Field in 2017. They don't have any problems with it. I was trying to pull the attendance for that game, because that was the question was, did they have a dramatic drop-off on attendance. It was NYCFC and Columbus on Decision Day in 2017. And if I could make Google be my friend this morning, then I could pull up what the attendance was for that. I don't remember it being anything dramatically different. It was a 2-2 draw. And, of course, they don't want to give me the attendance. Thanks, Google. It was a 2-2 draw. David Villa scored twice. Ola Kamara scored, and Josh Williams scored for Columbus. I didn't remember that much. So we will we'll double-check that and see if we can find the exact number. But I don't think it's going to be a huge, dramatic difference at Citi Field. I really don't. So if it's Atlanta, Seattle, LAFC, NYC hosting in midweek in the conference semifinals, you'll have big crowd Atlanta, big crowd Seattle, full house Bank of California, and I think you'll get 20,000 at Citi Field. I think you'll get more than that, but I think 20 is your minimum. If you're under 20, that's a problem. If you're over 20, I think it's a little hard to say it's a problem. So I think it'll be okay. And then from there, I mean, you've had the same question if NYC gets to the Eastern Conference Final. LAFC would have a sold-out place. Seattle would have a huge crowd if they end up hosting the Western Conference Final.
20,113. Your referee was Ismail Elfaf.
So right at 20. So they've got to get 20. If they don't get 20, then it's a problem. That's my benchmark. That's what I would leave it at. And I think it'll end up being all right. I think the idea about the midweek playoff games, that it's been a huge problem, it really hasn't been. And in some ways, the midweek playoff games can be a good thing, especially for TV. I think it gives you more TV windows to get into. It gives you more coverage on national TV because you're not up against NFL, college football on Saturday, Sunday, where you get lost in the shuffle or can't get a good national TV window.
Quick update from Felipe Cardenas, who was up at training this morning. Team is in the gym, but LGP, Barco, Tito, and PT are all doing individual work on the pitch. Mo Adams, George Bello, Dion Pereira playing small-sided games with a few guys from Atlanta United, too.
Okay. I mean, it's Monday and the game is Saturday, so, you know, it's not a heavy day. I think tomorrow will probably be a heavier day on the pitch. Wednesday can be a heavier day in terms of tactical plans. And then Thursday, fine-tuning, and Friday, walk through set pieces, basic stuff, and you get ready to play on Saturday.
Daniel Price had some Miles questions that we addressed in hour number one. He says, his complete blame is on the USMNT training staff. I'm channeling at the Kelly Francis for his overreaction Monday.
Yeah, I'm not going to go there yet because I just don't have the details. I don't know. And I don't know what the plan was. I don't know if this was something that was always planned. I don't know what the preparation was for the session. I don't know if it was, you know, thrown together, which I would hope not. It shouldn't be. If this was the idea, then it should have been prepared for, and players who didn't appear should have known that this is what was going to happen. But I don't know. I don't know what the situation was. I don't know how it happened, and we don't know the severity of it. So I'm not going to jump to those reactions yet. We'll see if anything else comes out about it. The biggest thing is going to be what we talked about in hour number one. I just don't expect any answers until probably lineup time on Saturday.
Yep.
You might get some on Thursday. I think it's possible because Frank de Boer has been very open and very willing to talk about whatever any situation is. So he might give you the information on Thursday. I don't think it's a guarantee, though, that he does, and I think it's something that could end up being a benefit to Atlanta United in the sense that it rattles New England a little bit and creates a lot of potential confusion about what Atlanta does in that match.
Nathan Pugh, and Nathan, I will qualify your comment this morning by saying I watched Concacaf Nations League this past weekend. I watched Saprissa take on Herediano in Costa Rica in league play. Nathan says, I watched the Scotland-San Marino match played in a giant puddle for some reason. International footy can really be a poor watch 95% of the time. Bring back club footy. Hashtag on par reaction Monday.
I don't know. I am from a really different time when it comes to the international game, because that was what the highest profile thing was for American soccer, was the international game. And now it's not. The club side is definitely bigger, and part of it's because of the national team's problems, and part of it is the rise of the club game domestically, which is a good thing overall, completely a good thing. Just, you get bad games, you also get great games at the international level. You get really compelling things, and you get things that are very boring. A lot of it comes down to Concacaf Nations League, and we'll dig deeper into it tomorrow as we get ready for US and Canada, which I think is a really compelling game. I'm really looking forward to this tomorrow night, because I think the U.S. will be tested on the road like they haven't been under Greg Berhalter in a competitive match. And I want to see how they respond, because that's part of the process. So overall, I think we've seen some really interesting results in CONCACAF Nations League. I disagree with the people who have said that CONCACAF Nations League is a waste of time and it doesn't mean anything, and it's not just to be and be negative and dismissive. I think it is not a waste of time overall, because CONCACAF is not just about the U.S. and Mexico. I think CONCACAF Nations League has been great for the smaller countries that are involved. It gives them competitive games. I think it's a valuable thing. I was kind of the same way initially about the UEFA Nations League. And like, well, what is this actually going to do? Is it going to mean anything? Well, it did. It was good competition. So these can be good competition too. The difference in CONCACAF is there is a big gulf in class. It doesn't change by not playing. And that's the number one thing. That's the number one thing when it comes to CONCACAF Champions League as well at the club level. Nothing changes if you just say, well, the U.S. and Mexico are so much better than everybody, so they shouldn't have to play anybody. No, like, you have to play these games for the smaller countries to get better. You also have to play these games for the U.S. I think Mexico handles this far better than the U.S. has historically. The U.S. has to learn how to be the big team and win games that they should win, and not slip up on the road in Trinidad and Tobago when all you need is a draw to go to a World Cup. So when that happened 2 years ago, and now 2 years later, we've got people saying, this is a waste of time for the United States. Well, no, it's not. Flat out. No, it's not. You couldn't go get a draw in Trinidad to go to the World Cup. So no, it's not a waste of time. Yes, you handled Cuba. That was the draw you got. You beat Cuba because Cuba's not very good. Okay. Now you got to play Canada home and away. And if you don't handle these two games, then you're not going to the semifinals of the Nations League. And that's an embarrassment. So there should be pressure on this tomorrow. You have to get a result. If you lose this game, well, then business just picked up. If you lose in Toronto tomorrow, oh boy, there's going to be some talking. Because
you want overreaction Wednesday.
But that's why this competition means something. And that's why anybody trying to tell you that it doesn't is foolish. Because you've got a compelling match on the road against a team that you've not played a competitive game in their country since 1997. And they're your northern neighbors, because they haven't been at that level. This tournament is huge for Canada. This tournament is huge for Curacao. This tournament is huge for a lot of countries. And yes, it's huge for the U.S. and Mexico too, because they have to win these situations as well. They have to deal with this pressure. So I love the Nations League concept. I think it's so much better than friendlies. If all we were doing at this point was just meaningless friendlies, I would be completely with Nathan, because I never got excited about the U.S. winning a friendly in Italy, or winning a friendly against Germany, or winning a friendly against anybody, because it's a friendly and you get to make 6 or 7 substitutions. And Jurgen Klinsmann was the master of sub number 6. Well, that didn't really help him much in competitive matches because you don't get those. So friendlies are friendlies. They don't mean anything. This means something. Tomorrow night will mean something. It's either going to mean that the U.S. is where they should be, and they handled the pressure of going into Canada, playing in front of a big crowd against a team that would love nothing more than to prove that they are on your level. That's meaningful if the U.S. handles that. Or it means that the U.S. has got some big problems because they couldn't handle that pressure and they lost. I think a draw is okay, but there's still going to be questions depending on how you get there. If you don't get a win, then there are questions about the United States that we would not have learned in a friendly against somebody that didn't mean anything, like the last round of games. Mexico always has a little bit of meaning, even anytime you play them, even when it's a friendly. But the Uruguay game, it was played at 50%. It just, what was the point? I'd much rather play the Cuba match. Hopefully against a team that gives you more competition, but still, I'd much rather play that match that means something. So I'll disagree with Nathan a little bit in that I think it can be compelling to have the international games. Not all of them are, and you do get mismatches, of course. But this setup right now that we're getting with meaningful games is better than just a bunch of friendlies.
Yeah, I mean, I was the guy yesterday watching Belize and St. Kitts and Nevis, Costa Rica, Curacao, and Honduras and Martinique. That's where my TV was yesterday, in addition to the American football. But no, I was watching the triple header and watching all the crowds and the audiences there and seeing how you had these teams with this meaning behind them playing in nations. Like, I was that guy yesterday.
Well, tell us about what happened.
Well, Belize won 1-0, and it was a packed house in St. Kitts. But the funny thing is that the fans were more interested in being behind the goals than they were being in the seated sections. And so it was pretty much standing room only behind the net to the camera right than it was seated as you're looking at activity, looking at from the camera position. So Belize won 1-0. Costa Rica, Curacao, that was a testy one. That finished in a goalless draw. And then Honduras at home beat Martinique 1-0 on an own goal that was scored in the 4th minute. A defender was trying to clear off the line, and it went the wrong way off his boot and into the net. And that was the only goal that was scored. And the Honduran crowd was absolutely electric yesterday. That was a cool sight to see.
So we'll get a great understanding of Group A with U.S. and Canada tomorrow. If U.S. wins in Canada, they should win the group. No problems, because they play Cuba in the Cayman Islands in November, and they host Canada in Orlando. So a win tomorrow should give the U.S. the group. Group B, Mexico won their first game in the Nations League. Bermuda is done, although Bermuda did get a win over Panama, which gives Mexico, honestly, the absolute inside route because they took points off of Panama. Panama's got to pull upsets on Mexico, and upsets being plural. Honduras is in charge in Group C. The win over Martinique was really important for them. It's Martinique and Trinidad battling it out for second. Group D is the really intriguing one. So Curacao is now on top, 5 points through 3 matches. Costa Rica only has 2 draws. Haiti has 1 loss to Curacao and 2 draws. Haiti's played 3 matches. Costa Rica's played 2. Curaçao's played 3. So Curaçao can get to 8 points max. Haiti can only get to 5 points max. Haiti, they couldn't afford that loss. So now they're pretty much out of it. I'm not going to do all the permutations of goal differential to get through, but they're pretty much out. Costa Rica is not in the greatest of positions that they would like to be. Curaçao has been one that has probably benefited from the most recent Gold Cup and this CONCACAF Nations League more than anyone. And they're in an opportunity now to go into a semifinal of the Nations League next year to play a meaningful game against the U.S. or Mexico or Honduras.
So I'm counting matches. I think there are 4 matches today starting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So if you're so inclined to sit at your desk or sit in the office or whatever, you got 4 matches starting at 3 o'clock this afternoon, 4 more tomorrow.
Yeah, 2-Day NA has you. Flow FC has you if you're paying a lot of money to Flow FC to have access to the English language. 2-Day NA has everything else, and if the game is not on 2-Day NA proper, you can download the app and watch it that way. You've got Saint Martin and Guadeloupe, not Saint Martin, but Saint Martin. I know there's probably a better way to pronounce it completely different than Saint Martin.
It's, yeah, Dutch. I think it was the Dutch half of the island versus the. Yeah,
they're not playing each other. It's Saint Martin versus Guadeloupe on 6 o'clock today.
Yep.
What else today? You've got Suriname hosting St. Vincent and the Grenadines. You've got Dominica hosting Nicaragua. You've got Guyana hosting Antigua and Barbuda. And that's it.
Today.
That's it. So no heavyweights are playing today. Tomorrow, U.S.-Canada is a big one. Mexico hosting Panama. It'll be the first time Tata Martino manages a match at the Estadio Azteca in charge of Mexico. That's tomorrow night after U.S.-Canada. You've got Jamaica going to Aruba, which is an intriguing one. You have... That's the big ones tomorrow. Yeah. Some of the smaller ones are going on as well. St. Lucia versus El Salvador. But yeah, those are the big ones. The final round, the final 2 match days will be in November. The one that I'm really looking forward to seeing is Costa Rica going to Curacao on November 14th. That will be a fascinating match because Costa Rica needs to win that. A draw for Curacao, and they're in a really good spot. Costa Rica needs to win it. Match day 6... Do they get the reverse one there if they already played? No. Costa Rica will host Haiti on match day 6. So that's Curaçao's final match. A win, and they go through. A draw, they possibly go through. It's going to depend on goal differential because Costa Rica would have to beat Haiti, and then you get into all kinds of different permutations. Yes. But CONCACAF Nations League can be a lot of fun. So... International footy, Nathan, can be a lot of fun. Can be is the key.
Can be.
Not always, but can be. Hopefully, the U.S. has a lot of fun in Toronto tomorrow. We'll preview all of that tomorrow with you. We'll go through possibilities on the lineup. We'll go through some of the conversation after the Cuba match. I mean, there's not a lot to get into from what happened on the field. Weston McKennie scored an early hat trick. It was a dominant performance against a team that you should dominate. We'll see if there were any lessons to learn and what we can bring forward, and we'll talk about what Canada is thinking about this match. This is probably the biggest match that Canada has played. They've had some that could have gotten them to the Hex in the last few cycles. They've had some big games. They've had some big Gold Cup games. They won a Gold Cup in 2000 when the Gold Cup was weird and had guest nations come in, and it was all kinds of weirdness. But this is maybe the biggest game in Canada since they qualified for the 86 World Cup.
Yeah.
It's huge. So we'll talk about it from the Canadian perspective tomorrow on the show as well. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks for all the questions on an Overreaction Monday. If we didn't get to any, we'll try to get to them on Twitter, or we'll bring them back up tomorrow on a Tuesday Thoughts edition of the show. Later today, Soccer Over There, we'll get into more international footy, and we'll start to look ahead to the resumption of league play on the weekend. That's tonight, 6 to 8 at the Brewhouse Cafe. Come out and join us. If you can't make it, listen on the app. Listen on soccerdownhere.net. Listen on Spreaker. You can come get your scarves. If you're one of our Patreon members, you can come pick up your scarf. If you want to get a scarf, shoot us a message or come out and see us, and we'll take care of you.
Yes.
So you can join the Holding Midfielders Appreciation Society.
Check.
Until then.
So, yes.
Oh, do you have more? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I was right there with you. If you haven't picked it up, and if you need to have it shipped, if you can't make it to either one, there's ways to do that too. So it's an extra $5 for Jason to put it in the SDH mail slot.
Yes, I can do that. I've done that for many people. It's been very cool. And I can do that for you too. Just shoot me a message and let me know. Talk to you guys tomorrow. Talk to you guys tomorrow on SDH. Talk to you guys tonight on Soccer Over There at the Brew House. Until then, mucho plati, y'all.
Mucho plati.